It wasn't yesterday because of the scenery, it was because everything changed. I don't hike anymore, not since that weekend in 1998, and I definitely don't trust people the same way. It all began as a simple idea, last-minute decision when the daily grind wore me down. I had a long weekend and hadn't taken time for myself in months. A hike seemed perfect: fresh air, solitude, nature. My plan? Head to the Cascade Mountains, take the Gray Slope Ridge Trail, and return feeling rejuvenated. I packed light, just a sleeping bag, some canned food, and water. The trail was remote but not too far from the busier routes, perfect for escaping the noise. The drive was quiet, just me and my truck, rumbling along dirt roads lined with tall pines. By noon, I reached the trailhead, parked, and set off. The air was crisp and the quiet felt endless. About 4 hours in, I found an old, rusted car, hidden in the overgrowth. It seemed out of place, a relic from the 70s, left in the middle of nowhere with no road in sight. It felt off, but I shrugged it off. Nature can be strange. As dusk fell, I set up camp by a creek. The silence around me oppressive. There was no breeze, no animals, not even insects. It felt as though the forest itself was holding its breath. After dinner, I lay in my sleeping bag and drifted off. Then, in the middle of the night, I woke to soft murmuring, rhythmic, unnatural. I convinced myself it was just the forest playing tricks on me. The next day, I hiked further off the trail. The weather was perfect, but something was wrong. The trees seemed to close in, as if watching. Midday brought an old cabin, half collapsed and overrun with vines. Inside, the walls were covered in strange, jagged markings nothing I recognized. Scattered across the floor were animal bones, and in the corner, half buried, a human skull. I froze, unsure how it had gotten there, and my heart raced as I backed away, deciding to head back. 2 hours into my return, I heard the murmuring again, louder this time, as though it surrounded me. Then came the footsteps, not mine, but steady and deliberate, closing in. Panic surged. I ran, crashing through the brush, but the steps never stopped. I reached a clearing, gasping for breath. And there, at the edge, stood a man, thin, his clothes old and torn. His eyes were hollow, his face gaunt. He didn't move, just watched me with an eerie tilt of his head. I shouted, but he smiled a crooked, chilling grin and turned back into the trees. I didn't stay to watch. I ran, pushing myself harder, the sun setting behind me. But when I reached my truck, a glance in the rearview mirror froze my blood. He stood at the edge of the forest, his smile gone, replaced by something darker, something like a promise. I sped off, heart racing, and didn't stop until I was safely back in town. Weeks later, a hiker went missing in the same area. His tent was found, abandoned. The authorities said it was an accident, but I knew better. I never went back to the mountains after that. Whatever I had seen, it wasn't finished. Since then, I've been more cautious, more skeptical of the world. I've researched old legends of missing people, stories that seem to cluster around certain times, like the fall equinox. I found others who'd had similar experiences, feeling watched, hearing whispers. Some even claimed to have seen something in the trees, just out of sight. I couldn't shake the feeling that there was something bigger at work, something ancient. And then, 5 years later, a forest fire near Gray's Slope Ridge revealed the remains of an old settlement, predating any known history. Markings found on stone pillars matched what I'd seen in that cabin. I wanted to go back, but fear held me. I reached out to archaeologists, sharing what I knew. At first, some listened, but soon, everything was shut down. News reports vanished. The site closed off. I realized then that whatever it was, it didn't want to be discovered. Something ancient, powerful, and dangerous was out there. And it's still waiting, watching from the shadows. Now, years later, I stay away from the mountains. I warn others to trust their instincts, because sometimes the legends are real. Sometimes the monsters are watching, waiting to strike. I know now that whatever I encountered in those woods wasn't done with me yet.